tragic case. The Office of the Commonwealth Attorney, Winter Green Police Officer, we lost an officer. So Winter Green Police Force lost their officer. We lost an officer that we deal with on a daily basis up to this tragic June 16th day. No sentence will make anyone feel better. Capital murder has been abolished in Virginia, so the most you can get is life. But this was a case where, because the defendant was intoxicated, it was a second-degree murder. And we sought the maximum. We did get the maximum sentence on the murder case of 40 years. So for that, there's a little bit of relief, but we still have the loss of our officer. I think the biggest thing, and what I try to do in sentencing, is not talk about how Officer Wagner died, but really make sure that every witness that we had talked about how he lived. And that was one of the most important things, to make sure that his story of how he cared, how he supported his family, how he loved others was the most important thing. I mean, what is justice is making sure that the law was followed, the defendant was given due process, and that we sought punishment commensurate with the crime, which we did. Obviously, I asked for up to the max of 83 years, so I didn't get the full amount. But again, I was given what I asked for, which was the max sentence on the murder. All law enforcement officers that work here in Nelson County are my guys, my gals. They are who I work with daily. They're the ones who protect and serve. And so I try to make sure when we have any case with our officers that we watch over them, we guide them in the law, we make sure that their cases are heard. And it's a tragedy when one of them are hurt or killed. And this was in that regard. So, we had the pain of his loss, we had the memorial, we've had this working through and making sure that who was Officer Wagner is known. And that's what I want to make sure is known, and why, again, I went into every witness how he lived, because that's the most profound impact. I mean, it was really brought out that Officer Wagner put his life on the line to save the victims here, and even the defendant from himself, and it cost him his life. And that is just something that can't be said enough about who Officer Wagner was. The case was about someone who took drugs to the point where they were uncontrollable. And I think what should be known is that drugs aren't harmless. This case was a testament to that. It took the life of one and physically harmed two others.
I represent Daniel throughout this. He's a good young man who's incredibly remorseful and sorry for everything that happened here. And we know that he is a better person than what occurred that night. And we're sorry that he got a sentence as heavy as he did. We were hopeful that we could show, everyone could see that he's a good person who never intended to harm anyone at all. The evidence in this case was undisputed, that he was not in his right mind, that he had a psychotic break that night, and he never intended any violence. He has no history of violence. It's not who he is, it's not who he wants to be. From the expert testimony, it was that Daniel Barmak had an unanticipated reaction to drugs that he didn't know and couldn't have known was going to cause him to have a psychotic break. And that but for that psychotic break, in which he no longer knew what was happening in reality, would any of these events ever have occurred. He didn't intend it, he didn't want it to happen, and once it started, he couldn't stop. No doubt that Officer Wagner's actions that night were heroic, and he sacrificed his life to save Daniel Barmak's. And we felt the best way to honor Officer Wagner's life was to be able to give Daniel Barmak an opportunity to prove who he really is, a good person who can give back to society that way, and that the sacrifice that Officer Wagner made was not in vain. He could bring back Officer Wagner to life. He regrets it and is remorseful and wants to do everything he can to honor Officer Wagner's legacy to him. He wishes he didn't cause any harm, and he hates that it happened that way. If there was anything he could undo what happened, he would. If anything in this courtroom could undo the death of Officer Wagner, we would gladly have offered that, and Daniel would have offered himself. It would undo that. We think that Daniel Barmak was worthy of mercy, that he was worthy of a second chance, that he clearly is not the person who did this. This was someone who was not in their right mind. And when we punish someone for something that they did that wasn't in their right mind, we're not punishing the right person, right? So now Daniel will pay a very serious price for the mistakes that he made, but it's not because he ever intended to hurt anyone. He did not.